Alright, I'm not that surprised to see the Lynx's run come to an end after what transpired in Game 3, but I am very surprised in the way they lost in Games 2 and now 4, because I would have never expected them to be the team to choke as bad as they did. Once again, they got up double digits because they came out with the right energy, so they were playing with a lot of pace and were either getting a quick bucket or flowing into their quick hitters. When they weren't just catching the Mercury's defense not being set, they were exploiting the Mercury's defensive coverages, because if the Mercury's bigs were dropping, then their guards were eating that space, and if the Mercury's bigs were showing, then that was opening up the pop or roll for their bigs, so they were basically getting whatever they wanted. But what made it worse for the Mercury was their non-existent help defense, especially at the rim, because their low rotations were too slow, too late, or not there at all. And that just allowed the Lynx to constantly get easy ones, so they just got to establish a rhythm. The most obvious sign of that was all of them taking on their matchups, and even making the tough shots, because when they usually get easy ones, their confidence is going to start to increase, so the Mercury's defensive game plan of forcing the Lynx into ones just did not work at all. I think the Mercury were trying to avoid a scramble as often as possible, instead of just trusting their rotations, so the Lynx made them pay for it in the first and third, and that was really a big contrast compared to the other end, because the Lynx were constantly committing to the help. They always had a player at the nail, a low man, and all of them were willing to scramble, so that was making their drops and shows against the Mercury screening actions effective, because there was always going to be help for the helper. But besides Satu from deep, the only player the Lynx really couldn't stop was Thomas, because she was constantly pushing pace, or even worse for them, constantly running that patented inverted to get downhill, and that play was damn near unguardable all series. The Mercury are always going to clear the middle with shooters spaced out, so that basically gives her a runway to the rim every time, because Wickham or Makani are always setting the screen flat. The Lynx's guards are never going to attempt to hedge in case of getting bulldozed, and the Lynx's bigs are always going to naturally have a hard time navigating the screen. Even when the Lynx had Heidemann try to hedge a few times, it just led to a pop for the Mercury's guards, so there was really no right coverage. And I think the only time it didn't result in a bucket or whistle for Thomas was when she just ended up smoking a bunny. If it weren't for her, the Mercury probably wouldn't have been able to stay afloat, because she basically controlled their entire offense, so she was a big reason they won the second, and even the fourth, but that quarter was more about them finally getting stops. I think they realized they had to start committing to the help, because all of a sudden, they were switching everything and making the right rotations, so the Lynx's offense just started to completely stagnate. They were constantly being forced into a late clock situation, with 4 of them even resulting in violations, and by the time McBride made a couple tough trades later in the quarter, it was just a little too late, because the Mercury had already took control of the game at that point. It all started with their quick 7-0 run in the first 2 minutes of the quarter that got the crowd going, and them capitalizing on that momentum to slowly walk the Lynx down throughout, because on top of their stops, they were also finally making shots. I'd say it was a mix of their shot making and the Lynx being a little checked out, because I think the Lynx let their misses on offense affect their focus on defense, so they were a bit slower on their rotations, not making them, or just having lapses that was opening up clean looks for the Mercury to get going. Bonner was converting on the swings, Whitcomb found Tracy in the corner on a skip from Thomas, and every single time they just needed a bucket late in the clock, one of their leaders showed up, and that was a contrast compared to the other end, because the Lynx obviously didn't have theirs to course correct. It just goes to show how difficult it is even for a team as good as them to manage that type of quarter in that type of environment without their star player and head coach. So all the credit to the Mercury for putting them in that situation and putting themselves in the finals. Just watch the tape.